Hello, welcome to this exciting session, Emerging Leadership Opportunities in Contemporary Academic Radiology Practices. I'm Jessica Robbins, an Associate Professor of Radiology and the inaugural Vice Chair of Faculty Development and Enrichment for my department at the University of Wisconsin. Over the past few years, I've watched myself and some of my radiology peers forge new paths in radiology leadership. These emerging leadership opportunities are poised to transform radiology departments, and possibly the field of radiology as a whole, by bringing intentionality and passion to previously under-resourced and overlooked facets of our careers. I will now take a brief moment to introduce each of our speakers. First, we'll hear from Dr. Kimberly Garver from the University of Michigan as she speaks to us about her perspectives as Associate Chair for Department Life and Culture. Next, we will hear from Dr. Lucy Spalluto from Vanderbilt University as she shares her experiences as the Associate Director for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and her newest role of Vice Chair of Health Equity. Dr. Tara Catanzano from University of Massachusetts Medical School Baystate will relate her journey to the Office of Faculty Affairs. Dr. Matthew Bucknor from UCSF will talk to us about his early perspectives on his new leadership role, inaugural Associate Chair for Wellbeing and Professional Climate. Dr. Lori Deitte will describe her innovative creative leadership lunch and learn program for new faculty at Vanderbilt University. And Dr. Jessica Leschied from Henry Ford Health System will round out our session as she talks to us about advocacy for all, always a form of leadership. Dr. Kate Klein and I thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy this presentation.
Hello, I'm Kimberly Garver. Thank you for joining this talk. And I'm the Associate Chair for Department Life and Culture. I'm an Assistant Professor at the University of Michigan Radiology Department in the Division of Breast Imaging. And there is my email. Feel free to reach out at any time. So I was a resident and fellow at the University of Michigan, and then I left to join private practice within the same town for about 22 years and came back about 2 years ago and really had an interest in wellness and culture development. So the history of this position is that our new chair joined the faculty on July 1st of 2019, and all along he had a very strong desire to put people first in any of his decision makings and to really improve culture was one of his top priorities. So along with my position in Department Life and Culture, he also appointed an Associate Chair for Faculty Affairs, along with these other Associate Chair positions that existed already. The structure of my role is that I get 20% protected time, 1 day per week. I use every minute of it and much more. I do get in a small administrative differential. I report directly to the chair throughout the year, of course, and at my annual review. I did ask for a 1 hour standing appointment time with the chair, as I knew there would be a lot to discuss, especially over that first year. The term is a 3-year appointment. That's renewable. And I do play a weekly presence at the department leadership meetings, include a small group of 6 and a larger group of 20. My 3 areas of concentration are in wellness and burnout, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and positive culture change. This is not only for our faculty, but also our learners in the department as well as our staff, which comes to about 1,400 plus people. I've been given lots of latitude in this new position, but it is completely uncharted territory, and we've been working very hard this year to figure out exactly what to do in this role. I'm also part of a new hospital-wide system of hospital wellness advocates under the new Chief Wellness Officer, who has only been in his role for about a year. So this is the burnout and wellness category. This is what we have done together in this first year. I've developed a radiology wellness committee with people from all levels of the organization. We had a grand rounds on burnout kickoff in September of 2019. And we're going to have a follow-up grand rounds in July to complete kind of that work. We use the Professional Fulfillment Index, which is a survey out of the Stanford Wellness Program, to assess for both burnout and fulfillment in our faculty, our learners, and our staff managers. I conducted 24 focus groups with qualitative interviews primarily of all of our division members and all of our leaders. We did move grand rounds and faculty meetings from 5 p.m. to noon and did provide lunch pre-COVID. We built a Wellbeing dashboard that contains many resources and will also house our metrics. This was especially important during COVID when we had almost 5 pages of helpful resources for the department. We are about to launch a monthly lunch and learn alternating with DEI topics. This is our logo, the Radiology Wellness logo. We wanted to reduce the stigma of getting help and mental health, so we put their logo right on the logo card. These are the books we ordered. We ordered 100 of these and passed them out to our faculty and leaders. The metrics we use are the Professional Fulfillment Index, which is unique in that it measures both burnout and professional fulfillment. We acquired this data over a 6-month period with paper surveys as well as electronic surveys. As soon as this academic year is over, we will be posting our faculty unused vacation days, our scheduled health days, as well as our sick days, and we'll be following for trends in the use of those days yearly. These are our burnout data. As you can see, based on the role of the department, these are the different burnout levels, but the numbers were small here in basic science, so these differences were not statistically significant, but our burnout rates are hovering between 25 and 35%. The most striking of this data is that our women faculty, learners, and basic scientists are far more burned out than the men at a rate of twice, and this is statistically significant. And in our ages, it is the mid-career people that seem to be most burned out in their 40s and the 50s. Here's our fulfillment data. Again, we can see a difference in gender in that men are more fulfilled than women. We do have a slightly more fulfillment in our older faculty and leaders. And this is quite striking in that our management team, our staff leaders in the department are really not very fulfilled in their roles at all. They have a lot of stresses, and this is something we'll be paying attention to. For diversity, equity, and inclusion, we did establish a DEI steering committee with many subcommittees from all levels of the department, including a group for women in radiology, for the staff, for environmental redesign of our library and hallways to make those spaces more inclusive, a professionalism and respect committee, a pipeline committee, and one for residency and faculty recruitment. We just recently had a very successful department-wide town hall to discuss racism and to make the subject less taboo. We are planning a 2020 summer movie review as well as a book club on anti-racism for the entire department. And again, we'll be launching monthly lunch and learns of DEI topics alternate with well-being in the fall. The metrics we use to establish progress include department demographics, as well as what we call Net Promoter Scores. Net Promoter Scores ask our staff and faculty how well our efforts and DEI work are actually working. So you can see this is the Michigan Medicine demographic column and how it compares to the Ann Arbor campus in general, our city, our county, multiple counties in Michigan, as well as our state in the United States. This is actually our department data, and this looks at our demographics of our applicants, our new hires, our current workforce, and those who undergo termination, either voluntary or non-voluntary. These are our Net Promoter Scores for our staff. This is in the spring of 2019. This is the fall. The top line refers to the Michigan Medicine numbers, the bottom line to the radiology numbers. The scale goes from -100 to +100. You can see from a staff perspective, we're doing slightly better than Michigan Medicine, but we haven't even quite reached 0 yet. For our faculty, the numbers don't look as good. We see the Net Promoter Scores as minus 29 in the for 2018 and then the fall of 2019. In terms of culture building, one of the most important things we did this year was to begin a collaboration with the Ross Business School Center for Positive Organizations. This is an organization that is really the world leader in scholarly activity, looking at how positivity in the workplace can affect performance. The faculty director of the CPO is now an adjunct professor in the Department of Radiology and aligning very closely with us in the department as well as the wellness office. Their undergraduate Magnify program was a program used to kick off our culture change. And we also had an initial leadership retreat back in October of 2019, so everyone could get to know our chair on a more personal level. This is what happened in the first year regarding culture change. We did restructure some organizational charts. That was done by the chair as he was getting settled. We implemented a new faculty scheduling program using Qgenda that had more transparent and equitable policies that are being more uniformly applied. Thanks to COVID, we quickly ramped up our home workstation deployment from 9 stations to 52 in just a matter of a couple months. During the heart of COVID, I conducted Find the Joy meetings, which really brought the department together on a weekly basis for fun and morale improvement. We had frontline care packages that we delivered during COVID for our frontline staff, and we've really made an effort together in communication. There is now a blog that the chairman uses on a regular basis. We use a program called SharePoint on our radiology intranet. We use Twitter. We've had multiple town halls, email, and we've encouraged everyone to join our workplace group, which is University of Michigan kind of Facebook group. Our goals for year 2 for culture, including developing a mission, vision, and values statement throughout the department that we use on a regular basis, not just post on the wall. We are planning ongoing leadership training and discussion groups at all leadership levels throughout the department. We're going to work on building more high-quality connections to break down silos and then increase positive practices department-wide. The tools that we use to measure culture change include the Organizational Culture Assessment Instrument, or OCAI, and this looks at the perception of current versus desired culture, as well as yearly faculty satisfaction scores and employee engagement scores. This is what the OCAI looks like. In red, you could see this is where people think the culture is right now. The blue is where they want it to be. These are the 4 types of culture. That includes the clan, kind of family-like culture, the adhocracy culture, which is really more innovative, the market culture, which is driven by money and financial gain, and then structured hierarchical organizations fall down here. So this is a way of assessing where you are, where you want to go, and progress from year to year. How did COVID affect all of this? Well, it rapidly intensified our culture change efforts in team building, communication, and of course, recently, racial justice. I would say we compressed several years of culture work into a short, few-month time frame. We also saw a rapid expansion of our home workstation project. Now we are dealing with the economic fallout, including layoffs and furloughs and RIFs. There is continued anxiety and fear about the virus and how we're going to deal with all of that, including building more space within our department. And I would say that most of our leaders are pretty exhausted at all levels. So I leave you with this. This was a curve we found very helpful in our department as we were working through all the different phases of our response to disaster. This is when disaster hits, and there's a little bit of a bump here, but then all of a sudden we noticed for about 8 weeks there was more community cohesion. And then as things started to die down with COVID, and the economic messages started coming, we all started feeling an enormous amount of stress and fatigue. This is what we call the trough of disillusionment. And then we are just starting to work in the working through grief, adjusting, and restoration. So it's important to recognize in our culture and yours that we are all on different points on this curve. Some of us skip stages, some of us fast forward, but everybody, is, including departments, are at a different point. So I hope that this graph is as useful for you as it has been for us as we try to understand behaviors, fears, anxieties, etc. Thank you for listening, and please feel free to email me with any questions.
Thank you so much for asking me to join this outstanding series on emerging leadership opportunities in contemporary academic radiology practices. When I initially started putting this talk together, the title was Experience as an Associate Director for Diversity and Inclusion. Since that time, the title has morphed more into Experience as an Associate Director for Diversity and Inclusion during the COVID-19 pandemic. And really, the title has become Experience as an Associate Director for Diversity and Inclusion during the COVID-19 pandemic and in response to recent events that have again brought to light the long-standing history of anti-Black racism in our country. I have no relevant disclosures. On a personal level, I have found that 2020 has really become a time for me to listen. A time for me to try really hard to be honest with myself and with others. A time to start conversations about race and inequality and health inequity that are really difficult conversations. A time for me to challenge myself to be better, to get out of my comfort zone, and take action to address the long-standing systemic racial injustices in our country. At an institutional level, our Department of Radiology at Vanderbilt has worked incredibly hard over the past several years to build the infrastructure necessary to support robust diversity and inclusion efforts. Having this infrastructure existing within our department has positioned us well to react to the current environment. The diversity efforts in our department really started about 7 years ago, in 2013. So in this picture, you can see Stephanie Spotswood, who is our first Associate Vice Chair for Diversity, and Reed Omery, our department chair. So Dr. Spotswood and Dr. Omery in 2013 worked together to develop a concrete written diversity plan. This written plan had goals and objectives and deliverables, which are important things to note. It started with buy-in from leadership at the very top, and as it was a written plan with discrete goals and objectives, it held people accountable for results. The next year, in 2014, Dr. Spotswood and I started to work together to develop our Women in Radiology program. And this was really the very beginning of my experience working in diversity efforts in radiology. We developed this Women in Radiology program to create an inclusive and diverse departmental environment to promote career advancement for our female faculty. I was working in these gender equity efforts in parallel with my clinical research interest that is targeted to addressing health disparities in breast cancer. I realized that the concepts of diversity and inclusion and health equity really fit hand in hand. While diversity and inclusion focuses more on the workforce and identifying ways in which people differ and creating environments in which these individuals and groups can feel welcomed, respected, and supported, health equity focuses more on the fair treatment, access, and opportunity and advancement for all people to achieve the best health that they can. Ultimately, both of these efforts together can lead to improved health outcomes for our ever increasingly diverse patient population. Our department recognized this very synergistic relationship between diversity and inclusion and health equity. And now we have a vice chair for diversity affairs. And recently I began to lead our more formal efforts targeted to achieving health equity as our vice chair for health equity. As we developed discrete health equity initiatives within our department, one of the very first things we did was hold a design thinking session to identify the major themes that really needed to be addressed within our department and our institution. Some of these themes including that we needed to better understand our patient population and the needs of this population. We needed to emphasize the importance of empathy, of provider empathy for our patients. We need to learn to share the patient experience, to understand what the experience of a patient in radiology is like. We need to develop an accessible curriculum for our trainees so they are better prepared to enter a more equitable healthcare environment. We needed to include health equity experts from outside of radiology, content experts who can teach us more about health equity. And we need to understand the learning needs of our trainees so that the future can have a better handle on how to develop a healthcare system that is more equitable. Our programming since has included grand round speakers, developing relationships within the community, and offering new learning opportunities to our trainees focused on these themes. As we identified these themes, I realized that they're really entirely synergistic with many of our existing efforts to improve diversity and inclusion, especially in the current environment. So yes, these efforts to improve health equity and diversity and inclusion are challenging. They require a tremendous amount of time from the people involved, resources from both the department and the institution, and buy-in at every level. This includes from the trainees, faculty, staff, local leadership, departmental leadership, and leadership at the national level. There are also several unique barriers faced by those working in the diversity and inclusion and health equity fields. A lot of you have likely heard of the minority tax. Often the people who are asked to do work in the diversity, inclusion, and equity areas are the very minorities that the work is focused on helping. This may take their precious academic time away from the other activities and leadership positions they otherwise may have been able to pursue. This pigeonholing can really limit underrepresented minorities and women in their ability to climb the academic ladder. So the next and really important question is, do these efforts work? Is the effort worthwhile? And in my experience, I would say a resounding yes. So this figure shows the impact of our diversity and inclusion efforts on the representation of women and underrepresented minorities in our radiology residency program over time. The blue line at the top represents the percentage of women in our department over time. And the red line represents the percentage of underrepresented minorities in our residency program over time. The dashed line on the left is when we implemented our diversity program, and the dashed line on the right is when we implemented our liftoff program that was targeted towards improving opportunities for female faculty in our department. So you can see that following the implementation of the diversity program, the red line at the bottom, the number shows that the number of underrepresented minorities in our program has increased steadily over time since 2015 and is now well above the national average. We were approaching 28% to 30% underrepresented minorities in our residency program, while the national average is under 10%. You can also see that the number of women in our residency program steadily began to increase in 2017 and is now approaching 40%, while the national average is around 25%. So in my experience, a resounding yes, that dedicated, conscious efforts in recruitment and mentorship can improve diversity in your institution. What does this look like at the national level? This is a picture of the 1931 ACR gold medal ceremony. This is Marie Curie receiving her gold medal. Of note, she had to win a Nobel Prize before she was given an ACR gold medal. And you can see that those giving her the gold medal are really not a particularly diverse population. So what does this look like now, 90 years later? So now the ACR Board of Chancellors is much more diverse. 10 of 32 members of the Board of Chancellors are women. However, you will notice that there is still a striking lack of people of color on the ACR Board of Chancellors, so there is definitely room for improvement. So in my experience, efforts in diversity, equity, and inclusion are most effective when ingrained into an institution with infrastructure to support these efforts, support from all levels of leadership, and accountability measures. These efforts require the support of a full team that engages patients, trainees, and members of the local community. And I believe this is an incredibly rewarding area to work in. Thank you so much for your time. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to present my AUR 2020 lecture virtually, all thanks to the COVID pandemic. Today, I'll be speaking about my career development journey to my current position in the Office of Faculty Affairs. I have no disclosures relevant to this presentation. I'll be focusing on three main areas of my presentation, namely, understanding the purpose and activities that occur in an Office of Faculty Affairs, the importance of recognizing growth opportunities, and understanding self-advocacy and self-development, particularly as they pertain to opportunities for leadership roles. Let's look first at the functions of an Office of Faculty Affairs. How many of you are aware that there are two main arms to matters pertaining to faculty at an academic medical center? My guess is that many of you are unfamiliar with this concept. I certainly was when I first became involved in faculty development. So what's the difference? Simply put, the main difference between the two offices is that, by and large, offices of faculty affairs traditionally deal with faculty governance, appointments, and promotions. And faculty development is more focused on creating support for faculty and developing and administering programming that will provide faculty with skills needed to succeed and advance in their careers and to progress in their academic rank. To look at this in greater depth, these are some of the activities of an Office of Faculty Affairs in a traditional setting. However, it's important to note that there is no uniformity across academic institutions as to which of these functions the Office of Faculty Affairs, or OFA, performs and which are done by different offices at the departmental level. Some institutions, offices of faculty affairs, provide administrative support for appointments and promotions. They're involved in faculty policies, contracts and letters of appointment, bylaws, and other faculty governances and grievance proceedings. As an example of how diverse offices of faculty affairs are, take a look at some of the activities that the Office of Faculty Affairs at my institution performs. Largely, we provide administrative support for the appointments and promotions processes. We keep a database of faculty appointment information, and we provide website information and resources for faculty. Contrast this to the responsibilities of a traditional Office of Faculty Development. Offices of Faculty Development are often responsible for mentoring programs, programs for women and minorities, orientation, career planning, scientific ethics, fellowships, and teaching and research skill development. Again, programs vary between institutions. At our institution, our Office of Faculty Affairs is largely responsible for the mentoring programs, orientation, and for providing career planning and guidance. In blue, I've highlighted activities that are performed by a subsidiary of our office for the Women in Medicine, and they provide programming for women and minorities, and the Office of Education is involved with the teaching, research, and clinical skill development programming. So as you can see, there's a lot of overlap, and it should be noted that many offices of faculty development and faculty affairs coexist under one large umbrella office. So now that we've discussed a little bit about what the Office of Faculty Affairs does, let's look at why or how a radiologist might end up working there. It's certainly not a traditional path for a radiologist, and I can assure you that I did not graduate from my residency saying that I wanted to be part of an Office of Faculty Affairs. So how did I end up in my current role? Well, the answer to that lies in the next part of our discussion, which is recognizing opportunities for leadership roles. I should also add here that it's not just recognizing opportunity, it's being willing to see a role that you want and to make the opportunity for yourself. So we'll touch on that when we discuss self-advocacy. How many of you want or expect a straight road and smooth sailing to get you to your goals? How many of you have a specific destination in mind? That may be a title or a dream job, or maybe an activity that brings you satisfaction. Straightforward and easy, right? Not so easy. For me, my career path kind of looked a little bit like this. Lots of unexpected twists and turns, convoluted ways to get where I was going. But now I realize that that's exactly the path I needed to take to figure out what I really wanted to do and what I was passionate about. And I learned very valuable skills along the way from each different step in my career path. And I think that that's very important to recognize, as you have to be open to learning from all of the activities and all of the experiences along the way to your real final destination. So there are three important components to my trip. And I'm going to spend most of my time on self-awareness and passion since I think that that's the most important step. We don't have time to get into all of this, but there are several well-validated personality type assessments that I really strongly suggest that you look into. The most well-known of these is the Myers-Briggs personality type assessment, which we'll discuss briefly in a moment, and also the Clifton Strength Finder. It's important to know that your background and experiences will impact how you perceive and respond to situations. For example, if you've been the underdog your whole life, your first response to a challenging situation might be to put up your fists, cock your chin, and be ready to battle. Whereas someone who was the captain of the football team might approach this with a lens of self-management and conflict resolution and teamwork. You can help with your own self-awareness by reading self-development and leadership books and articles or attending leadership and self-development courses. Self-reflection is very important to your own growth so that you understand all of the factors that are making you make decisions. And lastly, self-awareness involves having what I call your tribe or your posse. And this is a group of people who will perform reflective listening for you and give you honest feedback that maybe you don't always want to hear, but is very necessary, and they will support you. So just a word again on the Myers-Briggs type indicator. This is a personality type indicator which has been validated, and it states that there are 16 distinct personality types, which are made up of 4 sets of pairs: extrovert and introvert, sensing and intuition, thinking and feeling, and judging and perceiving. Really what this helps you to do is to understand yourself and your responses to situations. By understanding your personality and that of others, you can learn why they respond and why you respond differently to the same situation. Understanding this helps you to see their perspective and to learn to navigate a situation by taking all types of reactions into account. And by also understanding your personality type, you can use it to help direct your career choices. I put up this slide as an example of some of the books that I have used to improve my own self-awareness and emotional intelligence. You certainly can improve these. They are not inherent to everybody, and some need a little bit more time to develop emotional intelligence and self-awareness than others. And I strongly recommend reading any or all of these books, and I'm also a very big fan of TED Talks on these topics. Well, how about self-reflection? By using what I've learned in my background reading, I started to do some serious self-reflection about my personality, my strengths and my weaknesses, my self-erected barriers to success, my responses to situations, and where my true passions resided. Once I really understood myself, I was able to start looking for ways to align my passions with my day job. That led me to focus on education, trainee development, and faculty development, and that was the beginning of my current road. I just think these quotes say it best. Do what you love and love what you do. That's passion. Learn to say no to the good so you can say yes to the best. That's self-awareness, understanding what it is that is good for you may not be what's best for you, and don't just take the first opportunity that comes along for a leadership role if it does not align with your interests and your passions. Wait until that ideal job comes along. And passion is the difference between having a job and having a career. I discovered through my journey that what I am most passionate about is having impact on my trainees, having impact on the careers of others. And that has really helped me to understand where the next phase of my career is going. So how do I apply what I learned in my self-awareness journey when the rubber hits the road? How do I get into a position to leverage my skills and my passions? Well, that's where opportunity comes in. So my opportunity to follow my passion came in the form of Bay State's new affiliation with the University of Massachusetts Medical School in 2015. This affiliation led to the development of an Office of Faculty Affairs, which we had never previously had at the institution. The new Associate Dean of that office met with members of each department, and she offered opportunities for one-on-one meetings with the academic leaders of each department, and my role as a residency program director, that was me. I was very lucky in that the Associate Dean was able to see my passion and my interest in faculty development and academic advancement. We continued to meet monthly, and when it came time to expand her office, she offered me a role and became a mentor and a sponsor. And that's the third leg of this stool, sponsorship. What is a sponsor? A sponsor is someone who's going to put their reputation on the line in support of your career and your development. They're the risk takers. They're a person of influence. They're someone who is willing to put themselves out there in support of your career. And it's important to recognize that you need both sponsors and mentors. One of the ways that I look at this is that a mentor will give you a nudge up your career ladder, while the sponsor will pull you up to the top rung. And you need your heroes to come along and save the day, to see your values and to give you a chance. And for me, that was the Associate Dean of the Office of Faculty Affairs. But you also have to realize that sometimes you need to be that hero for yourself and make your own opportunities. And that's where the self-advocacy part comes in. How many of you feel like this? You see a position you want and expect that it's going to be given to you because of all of the good work you've done. Wrong. That's particularly true for women who wait and wait and wait and expect that they're going to be given opportunities or be selected for a position that they want simply because of their prior performance. That does not happen. Women in particular do not realize that self-advocacy is important. For example, even though I was already in this position in the Office of Faculty Affairs, I had to ask to be made a vice chair of my own department in the role of the Vice Chair of Academic Affairs, and to articulate why I was appropriate for the position and what I would do in the role. That's self-advocacy. And I like this diagram because I think it sums up all of it. A lot of your future and your career is in your own hands. You just need to know how to recognize what you want, which is self-awareness, and how to go after it. Perseverance, grit, determination, goal setting are key ways to getting where you want to go. And you have to advocate for yourself. If you really want a position or an award or a committee role, you need to put yourself out there, ask for it, and show people why you're right for it. And this is very hard for those of us who are introverts, which is many of us in radiology. This is where your determination to get what you want outweighs your natural reluctance to put yourself out there to get it. So this is my secret magic formula to my journey to the Office of Faculty Affairs. Passion, commitment, a pinch of grit, a tablespoon of drive led to the impact that I wanted to get into a position that really matched my interests and aligned with who I am and where I want to go. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Hello. It's a privilege to be with all of you today to talk about my role as the inaugural Associate Chair for Wellbeing and Professional Climate in my department at UCSF and offer some early perspectives on this new leadership role. So I affectionately refer to this leadership role as Director of Happiness. And this role really came about in our department as we recognized the need to better promote well-being and combat burnout. And it grew as a natural extension of my work as chair of our Diversity and Inclusion Committee. The leadership of our department really wanted to center diversity and inclusion at the heart of our new well-being initiative. So it was kind of an easy transition from my role as chair of that committee to this new associate chair position. So when I was first appointed to this role, I do what many people might do, which is I Googled the title, Director of Happiness, and you'll see a number of these images here that came up during my Google search, everything from kind of a movie poster to a group of coworkers out on a retreat in the middle of nature that looks very scenic and happiness, well-being promoting. You can see two friendly looking dogs in a workplace environment, also likely promoting happiness. And then you can see this guy in the bottom right-hand corner. He looks very happy. He was a self-proclaimed director of happiness, and I tried to drill down on his website, but I got one of those 404 errors, like that website's no longer active, and hopefully that doesn't speak to my future in this role I've been very excited to take on within our department. So the initial scope of this associate chair position was really defined in large part by a strategic plan that was recently completed in our department, intended to set the course of our department over the next 5 years. We spent the better part of the spring, summer, and fall of 2019 working on this strategic plan, developing working groups and trying to set out the strategic aims that were going to compose the plan. And I became responsible for leading this one particular aspect of the plan, which was developing and implementing initiatives that enhance community, support personal and professional development, and reduce bureaucracy. So I sort of led a couple of working groups in thinking about the tactics that we might use to drill down on this particular aim that as part of our strategic plan. So some of the tactics that we initially developed included encouraging integration and building meaningful relationships across divisions, locations, subspecialties, and mission areas. And like many academic medical centers, our department is, or at least can be, a very siloed place. And so thinking about ways that we can break down silos and promote interaction across different aspects of the department was really a huge focus of our initial work. You know, it's not uncommon at times in our department for two people to have the same research idea and to be working on the same kind of research topic, but have no idea that the other person even exists. And so thinking about ways where we can create more opportunities for meaningful engagement, both sort of during routine work hours and after hours was something that we really wanted to place a priority on. Additionally, we want to continue to expand our efforts around diversity inclusion, particularly with respect to some of our pipeline programs that we've developed in recent years, the reform of our selection processes, and educational opportunities around things like unconscious bias. And then finally, another key point of emphasis here in our early tactics was to think about ways to improve the work environment and ensuring that employees are working at the top of their license. So we really wanted to think very critically, for example, about the reading room environment. How do we make a reading room physically a place that is pleasant to be in? How do we make it a place that radiologists and other hospital staff find inviting and engaging, energizing to live and breathe in? And so we spent a lot of time doing a deep dive, looking carefully at every single reading room in our department and thinking about ways we could try to improve the work environments there. So I got going with a number of these initiatives after the fall 2019 when we sort of finalized our strategic plan. I was just 2 or 3 months into moving forward with a number of these items when COVID-19 happened. And so that required a key pivot, or a number of pivots in terms of the scope of my activities. So thinking about well-being in the time of COVID, I sort of had to rapidly shift gears and think about the ways I could be most useful to my department, given all of the uncertainty around COVID-19. And so first and foremost, I worked to try to advocate around issues of well-being, burnout, as we ramped down service and built new work schedules. And then now that we're ramping up services again. And this included activities like developing work from home guidance for remote clinical work. But then additionally, I saw as my key role, one of the things I was working on at length was thinking of ways to connect faculty, trainees, and staff to resources to promote well-being, despite the challenges that we faced with COVID-19. And this included organizing webinars on counseling and support with staff psychologists. And these were really well attended across our department. I think we had over 150 attendees on both of these webinars. And the first one really thought about helping workers to rethink how they do work and what the meaning is of work in the setting of the COVID pandemic. How when you're working now at home and not used to working at home, you can sort of try to set up your space and your schedule to allow you to be as productive as possible. The second webinar type experience occurred during one of our faculty meetings, where we invited a local expert from one of our integrative medicine centers to talk about meditation and to talk about how meditation can be used to help manage stress in the face of something as daunting as a global pandemic. And this was an incredibly well-received session. We were able to actually have all the faculty who were Zoomed in participate in, I think it was like a 15-minute long quiet meditation. And I know that's probably unexpected that you could have a group meditation experience like that over Zoom, but it actually worked incredibly well. And I got such great feedback on that. So I'm particularly proud that we were able to make that happen. Then additionally, I worked to build a new website to connect our department to resources for home. So with resources for self-care, family care, meditation, workouts, and entertainment. And finally, in the response to COVID, I thought a lot about how to promote enhanced communication and a sense of community, despite the fact that we were increasingly connecting only via Zoom or other electronic means. And so part of this was developing better messaging to try to bring people together. So we started to put out a monthly newsletter with work from home resources for workers and their families. And then we also took up a column in the weekly Chairs newsletter with sort of high-level perspectives on well-being and how to maintain a positive department culture. In addition to those newsletters, we developed an electronic feedback system regarding our COVID-19 response. And I think this is a key point of emphasis that, so often you can have power dynamics that make it such that it's hard for people to provide negative feedback about what's not working to their leadership, to their immediate superior. And so we really wanted to create a system that would allow people to anonymously provide feedback about our response, so we could be as sensitive as possible to challenges that we were facing. And I think people have taken advantage of that resource, and it's allowed us to be able to be a bit more granular about some of the problems that we faced. And then additionally, in the spirit of enhanced communication community, we also launched a department-wide book club. So, chose a book about sort of how people interact with technology in the modern era, and sent that to everyone who wanted to participate in the book club, and organized an event over Zoom, which was well received as well. So of course, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues, we were hit with another sort of very difficult situation This is this issue related to anti-Black racism in America that has reared its ugly head yet again. And so there was a second pivot in my role as the Associate Chair for Wellbeing to thinking about ways that we can promote anti-racist efforts. So of course, these recent murders of Black men and women illustrated how in the midst of a pandemic, that larger issues of social justice and systemic oppression remain so deeply ingrained in our society. And, I think we had so many people, faculty, trainees, staff who wanted to try to do something, to do more, to help with this issue beyond the protest and beyond the self-education resources that are proliferating all over the internet. How can we do more? How can we think about this organizationally as a department? And we're just getting started with some of these activities, but one of the things that we've thought about is from the frame of our Diversity and Inclusion Committee, well, maybe we need to look a little bit beyond diversity and inclusion, really thinking critically about how institutional structures perpetuate anti-Black racism and how can we dismantle those structures. So thinking about everything from health equity in terms of who has access to imaging within our department, who has access to clinical trials. Do we have a sense of, is our clinical trial access equitable? To thinking about ways we can support persons of color and make sure that their voices are heard, even though it's a minority voice within our department. And then another thing that I took a critical look at or I've worked on is thinking about ways to foster resilience in the face of racism. And one of the strategies that I personally have used to try to maintain a sense of resilience ever since I was a medical student actually is writing. Writing has been an incredible tool for reflection and empowerment for me to grapple with issues related to race and identity. And I wanted to try to promote this more widely within my department and my university at large. So I had an opportunity to speak at our university-wide town hall on social justice and equality in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. And I really spoke to the ways in which I've used writing to deal with difficult issues related to race and how I think it's important that we devote more resources to these kinds of activities. An example of that is a writer's workshop for medical students that I've developed over the last 2 months, designed and targeting medical students of color in particular, and trying to make sure that they have an opportunity to develop these narrative writing skills that hopefully will give them an opportunity to better reflect on some of these really hard issues, and then also be able to create a piece of writing that they can use to share their voice with others and have a larger voice within our university community. So that's been another focus of my efforts in this associate chair role. So I just have a couple of final thoughts in terms of some lessons learned here. The first is that I think defining the scope of the work is important, even if it changes. So obviously what my focus is right now is very different than what I thought it would be at the outset of this role. And I think that having clarity about what the scope of the role ought to be is really important for setting expectations and being able to meet those expectations of the faculty, trainees, and staff that make up your department. Providing necessary time and resources, like with any leadership role, is crucial. And then finally, really doing whatever is possible to foster a responsive system where you really try to listen widely to the concerns of the members of your department and put into place structures that can respond to challenges on the front lines as quickly as possible. I think that is also very important. So thank you again for joining me and for listening about my early experiences as the inaugural Associate Chair for Wellbeing and Professional Climate at UCSF. And if you have any questions about my activities in this role, I would be very happy to communicate with you via email or even set up a time to to talk or Zoom. It's so important now that we stay engaged with each other as much as possible. So thanks again for your attention, and hope to connect in the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Klein, for inviting me to share our creative leadership program for developing future leaders, really from day one. My name is Deitte, and I'm the Vice Chair of Education at Vanderbilt Radiology. This program started as a conversation between our department chair, Dr. Reed Omery, and myself about faculty development. And over the past 2 years, it's evolved into a fun and kind of educational way to connect with our new faculty and to help launch their careers. I'd like you to think back to when you started your current position, particularly if you were fresh out of training, say fellowship training, and what it feels like to be the new person, the new faculty member in the department. There really is a ramping up period to get to know other people, resources, directions that you might want to take with your career. Our goal with this program is to help jumpstart this process for our new faculty. So areas that we cover: skills development, specifically teaching skills, developing a presentation, giving feedback, provide tools and resources, and help our faculty become aware of the resources that we have in our own department and institution. Some long-term goals is to build future leaders and long-term retention. We launched the program in fall of 2018, and it ran from October to May. The participants were our new faculty, most of whom had just joined over the summer. And our very first session was more getting to know you kind of a session, very informal, with the focus on launching your career and well-being. We gave each participant a gift bag, and in the gift bag, one of the items was a gratitude journal. We kept the sessions informal and interactive. We wanted to hear feedback from our new faculty and for us to share with them as well. But some of the feedback that we received, especially towards May, was, is this program really going to end? We'd like to continue to do it. Some of the other feedback we received was about the faculty onboarding process and how we might make that more robust. And so out of this first year came a couple things. One was that we did make the faculty onboarding process more robust and started much earlier, before people were physically here in our department, helping them connect with people in advance. We also formalized our department faculty orientation once they arrived. One of the huge bonus benefits was this community that we formed. They enjoyed getting to know each other, and it may have taken a while for them to meet each other because they could be practicing in different physical locations and different specialties, and we truly enjoyed getting to know them as well. We started the second year of the program in August 2019, a little bit earlier than the first one, and the reason was that we had received feedback from our first cohort about how they would like to somehow continue in this program, and we decided to make it a longitudinal program. What we proposed was having a peer-to-peer mentorship as part of this program, and asked our first cohort would they like to be peer mentors for our new faculty. Their answer was yes, and so we had this community and connection event. Basically, it was just a sort of a happy hour get-together kind of an event, very informal, but for the first cohort faculty to be meeting our new faculty that were just launching their careers. The second year went from then October to June, so we just completed that. And when we first started, these were lunch and learn series, so we were all in the same room together, having lunch together. In March, we had to move to a virtual setting, and I will talk about that a little bit more later. And another thing that we did during the second year is we invited some of the alumni from the first cohort to come and help us co-lead the sessions, which turned out to be a lot of fun. So the third year of the program will start this fall, but we will jumpstart that with another reception for our new faculty and then former participants in the program. This we anticipate will all be virtual. Our topics for the program have included launching a career, well-being, leadership styles, feedback and crucial conversations, social media, branding, networking, presentation design, societies, and opportunities. This is a picture of our first two classes, and it's been so much fun to get to know them, and I'm very excited to see the direction that their careers will be taking. From the first two cohorts, 6 of our faculty already have formal departmental leadership positions. Chris is the section chief for body imaging. Katie is an associate program director for the Breast Imaging Fellowship. Virginia is the director of Grand Rounds. Lavelle is an assistant program director for the DR residency program. Lizzie is an associate director for Women in Radiology. And Courtney is an associate program director for the DR residency. I'd like to share some feedback from our participants. So one comment, I liked connecting with other new faculty. Hopefully I'll be working with these people for a long time, so meeting them and learning about them has been great. Another comment, I wish it were more frequent or able to continue in the summer. Another, I liked hearing everyone's input and perspective. And yet another, I liked meeting my peers and learning from Reed and Lori. The most helpful topics for me were about providing feedback and leadership styles. Another, I really enjoyed the relaxed atmosphere but informative topic. It addressed directly a topic that had been on my mind. And then one comment that we received about a Zoom, we were very interested in hearing about the perception about the Zoom format, and a comment was, I thought it worked fantastically well. We just finished our 2020 wrap-up session, and as you can see, this was a Zoom session. We've actually found the Zoom sessions to be very interactive and plan to continue this format at least for the near future. Thank you so much for your attention. We are really enjoying hosting this program for our new faculty, and I hope that you might consider doing something like this yourself. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Leschied, and I'm a staff radiologist at the Henry Ford Health System in Detroit, Michigan. I offered to talk a little bit about my experiences creating women in radiology networks for this session. But I was asked to create a title that wasn't gender specific, so what I've come up with is advocacy for all, always a form of leadership. But what I really am talking about is how the creation of these women in radiology networks across the country is a small movement in advancing inclusion and diversity for our profession. And I have to admit that putting this together at times, I got a little bit emotional for a number of reasons, but largely on a background of it being Pride Month and the turmoil that our country has recently been in revolving around racism and inequality. And it just reinforced my commitment to personally doing what I can to create a space for everyone in my work environment. Because there is a space for everyone. There's a space for everyone's voices and experiences to be shared. And I'll just share a quote with you before I begin, which I found particularly powerful, that I learned or listened to recently during a Pride Month recording that I was watching. And that is that when we share our stories, first we need to share them with ourselves. Next, we need to share our stories with others. And each time you do that, you are contributing to the revolution for change. And I thought that was quite powerful. I have no relevant disclosures to make. My objectives are brief, since this is a short talk. Basically, I would like to describe my experience advocating for women in my profession and how it has led to leadership roles and networking opportunities, in fact. When I started my journey or career in radiology as a first-year resident just over 10 years ago, women in radiology networks weren't really something that was widely spoken of. And I have to admit, at the time, I didn't realize or really understand why there was a need for certain groups. But shortly, within the first couple of years of residency, a bright young faculty member decided or took it upon herself to start a Women in Radiology network at the University of Michigan. And I thought she did so very successfully. And I quickly became involved in all of the Women in Radiology events and efforts to spread our message and to promote diversity in our specialty. But now, even if you just Google Women in Radiology, thankfully there are certainly many more institutions, many of which are university-based, across North America that now have dedicated Women in Radiology networks, which is fantastic. Like I said, when I started radiology, I don't think I was aware that there were so few women entering the profession, and that had in fact been a historical trend. Though I should have when I was the first woman of my class of 11 men starting residency. But it didn't bother me much. I had some great women mentors in both upper years of residency levels and also in faculty positions. And I didn't feel like I needed to prove myself. I was just as capable as the men in my class. But that changed in 2015 with the arrival of my son, Stuart, when I was a MSK fellow. And I quickly realized that this job is a little bit more challenging now. And specifically when I came back to work, I struggled to find safe places to pump breast milk. And we didn't have a designated lactation room. I also felt like at the time it wasn't really accepted to talk about the need to take pump breaks. And this is only 5 years ago. And so I had a kind administrative assistant who printed out this card of the woman breastfeeding her child, and she laminated it for me and tied a pretty pink bow to it. And she said, use this whenever you need to use a room, whether it's a empty ultrasound room or somebody's office who's kind enough to let you use it, and just put this on the front door if there's no lock so that people know what you're doing. And I was really appreciative of that because it finally almost gave legitimacy to what I was doing. And so after that, I started doing the same thing. Every time a tech came back to work after having a child, and she would share with me her struggles with finding an appropriate place to pump breast milk, immediately I would print out the same card and ask this lovely administrative assistant to laminate it for her, and I would pass it along. And I think I did this for about 4 or 5 women, and they were so appreciative. Finally, I have at least something I can put on the door that says, please respect my privacy. I'm feeding a child. 2 years later, with still no dedicated lactation space within our department, though several within the institution, though not really conveniently located close to radiology department, I approached our chief administrative officer, Dana Habers, and asked her if she would support the development of a dedicated lactation space for all women of the Department of Radiology, not just residents and physicians, but also
ancillary staff, nurses, techs, etc. And herself, a mother of 4, immediately lent her support, and together we found the space, which is not an easy task in an old medical institution. Space is always at a premium. In fact, many people were being asked to start to share their offices, and so finding an old office to dedicate to a lactation space was not a real popular idea. But we realized it was necessary, and we had the support of the department to do so. And so we converted an old small office space into this beautiful lactation room that you can see here. We picked our own tranquil pictures to hang on the wall. We made sure that there was a functioning pump. We were not able to put in a sink space, unfortunately, but it was right next door to a small washroom, so there was at least a nearby space where women could clean their pumping parts. And it was able to be locked from the inside with appropriate signage on the outside that said lactation space, and a slide that says occupied or not occupied. And this was successful. I mean, women used this all the time. We, in fact, Dana Habers has sent me recently a snapshot, a picture of a survey that she put up on the wall, asking people to sign in when they used it, and any feedback, and a lot of helpful feedback, including, temperature being too cold, and so she has since adjusted that. But when she sent that to me, I was just amazed at how many women needed this service, and so I was proud of our efforts, and really thankful to Dana Habers for her support in that endeavor. Well, word got out quickly that I was an ally for women in the department, and soon Dr. Ursula Knepp decided to leave the University of Michigan and join a different practice, and she approached me as a first-year faculty member and asked if I would take over the Women in Radiology group at the University of Michigan, which she had done a fantastic job of starting and building. And I told her I'd be honored. This is something that has developed into a passion of mine, and so I became the chair of the Women in Radiology group at the University of Michigan. And here's a picture of one of our book club meetings here with many wonderful people who I still consider great friends, colleagues, many of whom have been mentors, personal mentors to me, as well as sponsors. So what is my advice or points that I've learned from starting this process? And what's my advice for someone who's looking to start a similar group? Well, number one, you need obviously support from your leadership. And that's more than just a statement of support. That is, in fact, a financial commitment to the group's efforts. Number two, setting a mission statement and a vision for the group is important in kind of directing your efforts. Keep in mind that a mission statement is the why of why the group exists, and the vision is what you intend to do with the group. Then I had a steering committee of about 5 or 6 members with representation from all levels of training, and ideally from each division or as many divisions as possible. And this was the team that helped come up with ideas for events, using their network connections, help bringing in speakers for different events, and then at the end of each year, kind of evaluating the success of each event, and then coming up with goals for the following year. Each year, I would sit down with the steering committee and come up with a calendar of events. And I think if you're shooting for between 4 or 5 events for the year, then I think that's a good goal to have. Within those types of events, we always wanted to include some sort of professional development event where we are working on ourselves, to be the best versions of ourselves. Some of those topics included over the years negotiation skills, presentation skills, being an effective mentor, time management skills, etc. And then what I believe is very important to women is having social events. I mean, that's how we form camaraderie and collegiality at work each day, and getting to know people outside of the work environment and getting to know their family life or what they like to do outside of work, I think helps form relationships. And those relationships will in turn become mentoring relationships or perhaps sponsoring opportunities. So in the language of quality improvement or lean processes, it's always important to measure the effect of your intervention or action. And so after a couple of years of the Women in Radiology Network at University of Michigan being in existence, several of us decided it was time to survey our members and really assess whether this was effective or not, or what steps can we take to improve the experience. And this paper was published in AJR demonstrating our results. And it was very positive and very reassuring, very motivating. We found that overall, most of our members found that all of the events were useful to their career development. It allowed opportunities for networking, for mentoring, for research collaboration. Camaraderie was mentioned in the survey responses as a benefit of the group. And also, we also assessed or inquired about suggestions for future activities, which was very helpful for the following year. So as I mentioned in my objectives, being involved or being a visible advocate for women or an ally for diversity in radiology soon led to other opportunities for me. And one of the first was through the Michigan Radiology Society, which is a chapter of the ACR. A few years ago, developed a new commission for women and general diversity, and I was asked to sit on the committee, and I still do. And I'm really proud of the things that we've done at a regional and state level. We continue to do medical outreach events to all of the med schools in the state, to continue to expose specifically women and diverse medical students to the field of radiology. We have a quarterly newsletter and a website dedicated to our activities. One of the things that we are working on more recently is encouraging and promoting family-friendly policies at residency programs and also radiology practices within the state. And then we're trying to track whether our efforts are impactful, which is the challenge. I'm also a member of the AUR Diversity Committee as well. After a total of about 9 years at University of Michigan, I made a decision in 2019 to move to a different health system at Henry Ford in Detroit. And I was so pleasantly surprised when within the first few months of working there, I had 2 bright women residents approach me and say, "Hey, we heard that you were involved in a Women in Radiology network at U of M. That's something we'd really like to start here. Would you be interested? Can we ask for your support and guidance in doing so?" And I'm happy to say we did just that with a lot of legwork from these 2 young women residents. But we held our first Women in Radiology meeting in the fall of last year. We've recently done our first Zoom meeting as we are entering this new virtual environment. We talked about mentorship and sponsorship, and I believe our discussion is going to lead to the development of a formal mentoring program at our institution that will be initiated by our Women in Radiology group. We've more recently talked about developing a web page to help with recruitment efforts, and also at a larger scale be involved in recruitment efforts for the residency program. Future endeavors, I hope we will be able to network with what I believe is a very robust institutional diversity program, and continue to get the word out that we are working for a institution that values diversity at all levels. So in conclusion, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to my 2 cents about something that I believe is very important. In closing, this comes back to something I've said before. There is a place and a space for all of us, and we are all more successful when we learn and listen to all of the voices in our lives. I guess my point is that when you advocate for those around you, it becomes clear that you're passionate about something, and that may lead to something great. It may lead to a leadership position, better networking opportunities, or who knows what else the future can hold. So thank you again, and I hope everyone stays safe